I was in a war zone 30 years ago. So I was traveling as a monk in the former Soviet, and there was a war taking place between Georgia and the Abkhazia. We were literally the only food relief in the whole city. Red Cross, no one else was feeding people except for Food for Life. So they would prepare this, big tubs of this porridge, drive this tractor to different parts of the city under gunfire. So this grandmother comes up to me and she's holding onto her grandchild. And she says, "How is it possible that you boys are coming here and providing us a meal? This is amazing. This is a miracle. There's no other food in the whole city."
All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxims, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Paul Turner, who co-founded Food for Life Global in 1995, which has served over 8.8 million meals to hungry children around the world to date. I was on the website trying to write the right number, but it's always going up. So the last one I saw was like 8.8 million people.
A billion.
Billion?
Yeah.
Oh, man, I missed a zero. 8.8 billion. Sorry about that. He's also a former monk, a veteran of the World Bank, entrepreneur, holistic life coach, vegan chef, and author of 6 books, including Food Yoga, 7 Maxims, Souls of Happiness. You have an animal sanctuary. You've traveled to 72 countries over the past 35 years, help establish the Food for Life project, train volunteers, and document the success. So welcome, Paul, to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Maxim.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed a zero. I was just so many of them. I was like, that looks like 8 million.
It's a big mistake. Yeah, and that's a conservative estimate. And it's based on, actually, historically, the charity goes back to the 70s, the mid-70s. It started with a bunch of monks feeding village children in India. And their yoga teacher said, we shouldn't have anyone hungry around the ashram. And in fact, there were children fighting with dogs over scraps of food.
Oh,
and he was like, this is crazy. This should not happen. Children shouldn't be hungry like this. So we have to start feeding them. So that's the roots of the project. It started by a couple of monks in India. It sort of expanded to Australia, where a soup kitchen was opened up by some monks from the same ashram. And then eventually they realized, wow, this is a great way to connect with people, It's a great way to make friends and to solve a real social problem. And because at that particular time, they were concerned about the public relations side of things. Like, we want to look good because obviously we're talking about the 80s, right? 70s.
Yeah.
It's sort of weird. It was even back then, it was sort of weird to be a monk, to be a shaven-headed monk in a cosmopolitan city like Sydney or any New York or London or whatever. So they saw the program primarily as a public relations initiative. Hey, we can do some good community work. People will get to like us, and then we can communicate our spiritual truths and so on. When I got involved as a monk, my first service was preparing meals and serving people in Sydney. But I realized that it was much more than a public relations exercise, that this had some real deep value as not only a solution to world hunger, but as a solution to all social ills, because what we learned from that Hindu tradition that it's coming from, in India, if you've ever been to India, it's very common that people will go that your host will go out of the way to make sure that you're being fed. If you go to a temple, you get free food. It's just part of the social fabric that, make sure that no one goes hungry.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is because there's this understanding that we're all spiritually equal. We're all connected. We're all God's children. It doesn't matter what body you have. In essence, we're all connected. So I realized, okay, well, this is a powerful message that can be presented to people in a non-sectarian way, because essentially, even if you're an atheist, you have to accept the fact that we're energetically connected. At a certain point in time, there was an energetic event happened, and we all came from that energetic event. So it was an energetic signature which runs through all of us. We're all connected. So even if you don't believe in God, the fact is we're all energetically connected. We're all earthlings, right?
Yeah.
So I realized, wow, this is powerful. Food has this power to communicate this sense of unity in the world. It sort of is a great communicator. It breaks through all barriers. Things which normally divide us, like race, language, culture, whatever, can be dissolved through the sharing of food prepared with a loving intention. When I give you a plate of food and it's prepared with a loving
Yeah.
intention, you realize, wow, this guy actually cares about me. He respects me. So it communicates that real powerful message of unity, of oneness. And that, I believe, is the solution to things like world hunger. Because if we had this sense of unity in the world, if we saw ourselves as brothers and sisters, global citizens, earthlings, however you want to put it, children of God, if you're a spiritual, religious person, if we saw ourselves like that, hunger can't exist.
Yeah.
Poverty can't exist because you wouldn't tolerate hunger. You wouldn't tolerate poverty. So at Food for Life Global, once I realized that I wanted to steer the charity in that sort of direction beyond simply just feeding bellies, but with a greater, more powerful mission of uniting the world through pure food. That became the tagline. So I migrated from Australia when I was 30, 1993. I left to the United States and I set up the headquarters for food, which was called Food for Life Global, and began expanding and developing this mission. And I traveled, as you said, like 73 countries, and helped set up projects around the world with the purpose of not just feeding hungry people, but creating a sense of unity in the world through the medium of food.
What, so let me ask you this question. What made you want to, obviously, those are all great reasons to want to help, but I feel that all the people that have had great impact in the world and in their life all committed to one specific path of helping. For example, feeding people. For some people, it's helping people with cancer or other specific areas. What was it for you that made you want to basically dedicate the rest of your life or a big chapter of your life to head down this specific direction? Like, what made it that it connected to you
What?
that deeply?
Yeah, I understand. It's actually 40 years now. So I just turned 60. So I started when I was 20. And it gets back
Okay.
again to my spiritual roots. As a monk, I was a monk from the age of 19 to 33, the prime years of a man's life. And I focused on self realization. So I practiced celibacy. I lived a very simple, austere life. I slept on the floor. I never used a pillow. I took cool showers. I was very chaste, and I didn't go clubbing or all those things that young people do. I didn't watch TV. I just studied and focused on charity work and building my character and my self awareness. Um, Through that process, I became aware of a very powerful lesson that my teacher passed on to me. And he said that spiritual life begins with the tongue. I later reformatted that saying to evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue, because the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. So what you speak has a very powerful impact on your consciousness, the words that you speak, the vibration that you make. Similarly, the food that you taste, that food is carrying intention. It is carrying certain energetic signatures inside it, and that will affect you on a subtle level. It will affect your mind and your consciousness. If you eat food which is prepared in a way which is unclean, or it's coming from a violent situation, as in the case of like slaughtered animals, then that negative energetic signature will be passed on to you. You'll consume that on a subtle level. It will affect your mind and consciousness. So when we learn to master the tongue, it means eating pure food, food of a higher vibration, clean foods prepared with a loving intention, and also speaking only words which are uplifting, foods which are truthful, foods which are empowering. And if you'd follow that path, then in the yoga tradition at least, you can learn to become a master. You can raise your consciousness and learn to master and control all your senses, including the mind. So that became a very powerful lesson for me.
So ultimately, you were mentioning that you were a monk from, I think, like 19 to 33, I believe. And that was kind of like the prime years of your life where you slept on the ground, mattress, and you were speaking about the tongue, right? So the language that you spoke and the food that you were consuming, that's...
Oh, okay. Yeah, so as a monk, the most important lesson I learned as a monk was that spiritual life begins with the tongue. I later rephrased that, gave it more clarity by saying that evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue. So the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. So what you speak has a very powerful impact on your consciousness. And similarly, the food that you eat, what you taste, has an impact on your consciousness. If you're eating violent foods prepared in a violent situation, foods which are being prepared with a bad consciousness, disgruntled workers in a restaurant, then that food can have a negative impact on your consciousness. As opposed to food which is, even simple foods which have been prepared by a loving mother or a father. The food is a carrier of intention. So what you eat has a powerful impact on your consciousness, and what you speak, if you speak words which are truthful, uplifting, empowering, that will also raise your consciousness. So this is a very powerful lesson that I learned as a monk, which enabled me to control my senses and my mind, enabled me to be successful as a celibate monk. And I wanted to share that through the medium of this charity, because I realized that if people can learn the power of the tongue, in terms of like evolving their consciousness, then there can be a real shift in the world. It's not just simply about eating plant-based foods. It's about understanding the power of the tongue and how what you eat and what you speak dramatically influences your consciousness, your level of awareness. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book called Food Yoga, which is on Amazon, where I tried to share that understanding in a way which was accessible to a lay person, non-religious, non-sectarian sort of message, basing it on science as well. So that message is very important to me, and that sort of drove me all this time for the last 40 years. It's not just been about filling bellies, but it's about teaching this message of food yoga, using food as a medium to connect, to unite each other, to unite the world, to raise our consciousness, become better people, to really realize our full potential.
So if you don't mind me asking, so you mentioned you became a monk from 19 to 33. What was it that made you want to go down that path? And when did that lesson really kick in for you in that process? Because I understand like that's a very powerful lesson. It's one thing to hear it, but it's another to like deeply understand it in your body and to want to share it with the world. And so I'm curious, when did that kind of happen, that shift for you?
Well, it didn't. When I first decided to become a monk, I didn't understand that concept. That was not new to me at that time. Getting back a few years before the decision to become a monk, I was a regular kid growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney, playing football, playing cricket, chasing girls, all sorts of things, just like a regular kid. I was not unusual in that sense. I was a decent student. I was pretty sharp at school. I did pretty good at school. But at the age of 15, I became very fascinated by astronomy. I'm not sure what pointed me in that direction, but for some reason, I got enamored by the night sky, and I would sit up all night with my best friend, and we would study the stars and just philosophize about, wow, we're so small, the universe is so big. what's the, what's the story here? What's the real story? And so I was asking these big questions as a 15-year-old boy. I wasn't taking drugs or anything, just genuinely, sincerely curious about the night sky and about life. So that planted a seed in my heart that later on was fructified when I was introduced to Eastern philosophy, and I learned about reincarnation. I learned about the nature of the soul, how we're eternal, how time is an illusion. It's only present in the material realm. It's the great controller. That in the higher dimensions there's no time. All of these things became very enlightening for me, and I wanted to learn more. So at the age of 19, 20, I decided, you know what, I'm going to find out. I'm going to try and get the answers to these questions, these big questions. And it was very radical. I mean, most of my friends were shocked when I did this. But I think it's because they didn't really know me. There's a certain way we present ourselves to our peers, and then there's the real you that's, not very public. And for me, it was like the philosophical Paul, the artistic Paul, as opposed to the boisterous, rowdy Paul that would get into fights and just try to prove himself and driven by ego. So yeah, it was actually very refreshing for me to get out of that situation and like focus on myself. And I did that for the next 14 years.
That's beautiful. It's kind of something looking back that I wish that I did earlier on. It would have led to a very different life. You have a very calm and composed energy, and there's something different about your energy when you're speaking and how you show up.
Yeah, I mean, it very powerful influence on the rest of my life, because even if I try to get away from that experience for whatever reason, it's too profound, it's too deep in my consciousness. Like I see the world in a very different way. I see the higher potential of people rather than just seeing them as a body. I see you as a spiritual being, like expressing yourself through physical form, and that's just part of normal operations for me. So sometimes they can make it a little bit difficult in terms of social interaction. So I have to turn that off.
I bet.
You know what I mean? Because it's too much. You just have to sort of be in the now and just, okay, I'm dealing with this energy. Let me just deal with this energy. And sometimes it's not appropriate to always see in that way, but it's always there that I see the spiritual nature of things around me. I see the presence of God, the divine creative hand everywhere. I see the potential within animals, within plants. Every single living thing has a purpose.
Yeah.
Every herb, every seed, every insect has a purpose, a service to humanity, a service to the ecosystem. Nothing is useless. Everything is perfectly designed and coordinated. It's a perfect ecosystem, but unfortunately we think we're smarter than, nature or God, and we mess with the system and we mess things up. And as a result, most of the challenges or that we experience are because of our interaction, our misguided, ego-driven sort of influence on what's something which is already perfect.
And how do you kind of use this philosophy to kind of lead this, I would say, this movement that you created or that you're serving? How do you use this energy, these lessons, and the fact that the world operates in this way, right? A lot of people are coming from a place of ego, thinking that they're better in nature, that they have control over certain things. So how do you navigate this world and lead this movement towards being able to serve more people?
Well, again, it's like I've branded myself in a couple of ways. One is as the food yogi. When I wrote this book, Food Yoga, I thought, yeah, I'm the food yogi. I can teach people how to nourish their body, mind, and soul, right? Then I realized, well, I'm not just a food yogi, because obviously I have other passions Like I'm interested in billiards, I'm interested in martial arts, I'm interested
Yeah.
in many things, right? So if I just say I'm the food yogi, then people think, well, he's cooking all day and he's inventing recipes and that's all he does. And obviously that's just not me. It
Yeah.
can't be defined like that. So then I came up with another way to like frame my experience, and that was as a pragmatic spiritualist. So I'm not denying the fact that I'm a spiritual person and that it's a very important part of who I am. But I feel like one of the talents that I bring to this sphere is that I'm able to present spiritual concepts in a way which is very palatable, very digestible for a lay person, for a non-religious person. So all of the books that I write is presented in a way within the context of that particular audience's understanding. So, for example, I wrote a book called The Yoga of Pool, right? Because I used to teach billiards. And I could play like at a pro-am sort of level. So I was a teacher of pool. So I wrote a book about how to play billiards. But I introduced in that book, aside from giving the fundamentals of how to play, like the stance, the cueing, and all that sort of stuff, the fundamentals, I also introduce within the sports psychology part of it, Eastern philosophy, quoting, the Bhagavad Gita, for example. So it's very unique. It's a very unique way to introduce these concepts within, something as mundane as billiards. But I was able to do that, and as a result, it's one of the best-selling billiards books in the world because it's so different.
I,
It's called The Yoga of Pool: How to Become a Champion in Billiards and in Life.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that. My wife and I are trying to play pool like every week or so. So I will definitely go and look into that book.
So I actually invented this billiard aiming device based on geometry.
Oh,
So I actually invented this. It teaches you how to play pool, how to cut the ball in the pocket. It's all based on geometry.
oh, beautiful. Yeah, I'll definitely I'll buy your book because yeah, my wife's kicking my butt right now, so I need to practice a little bit. um, so
Yeah, just don't tell us. Keep it
yeah,
secret.
exactly. Yeah, she'll be like, "Why are you so good all of a sudden?" Um, so I love to talk a little bit more about the Food for Life project because you guys do a lot of different things, right? So obviously there's the part we're doing the meals.
Yep.
But there's also you guys do gardening project, plant-based education, farming projects, animal schooling. I know you have your own animal sanctuary, which we kind of spoke about before we started recording. Do you mind kind of elaborating a little bit more on some of these aspects of the organization? Because I really want the people listening to be able to support either financially or in person, because I know that's a big part of the nonprofit world, right? Is we need to just continue the funding to be able to serve and help more people, and for the people that it's resonating with, that have it in their hearts, to be able to serve. So I'm sure they would like to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Food for Life Global, the Food for Life project has become front and center for everything that I do. Even if I start a business, a social enterprise, it's always for the purpose of
Yeah.
supporting the charity, Food for Life and the sanctuary, Juliana's Animal Sanctuary. So as a natural evolution of that product or that service, we're very cost efficient in what we can do. First of all, it's plant-based, 100% vegan, and it's freshly cooked. On average, we can serve someone a freshly cooked vegan meal for
Wow.
50 cents. So it's incredibly cost efficient. So every $100 donated can equate to
Yeah.
200 meals being provided. So there's that aspect. So aside from the cost efficiency, the incredible operations that we have in terms of distributing quality food around the world, we're now in 65 countries. We realized as a natural consequence, well, we have to also include food production like gardening. So some of our projects actually grow their own vegetables to reduce the costs. And as a result of that, we also include like education. So aside from simply just growing our own vegetables, we also teach people, the local people, how to do that organically. So there's that. And then we also have a couple of our projects have their own schools. There's orphanages. So we're not only providing food for these children, but they're also getting
Yeah.
education. And then the animal sanctuary also was born out of the connection that I had with Juliana. She made me realize, she said, look, if you want to unite the world through pure food, that has to include animals as well. Now, we naturally thought, well, we're not killing animals, therefore we're helping the animals. But she made me realize, well, we have to do something directly for the animals as well. So as a result, we sponsor the food feeding of rescued animals as
And
well.
how many animals do you have now on your farm?
It's over 150. We have about
Okay.
50 large animals and over 100 small animals like chickens, rabbits, um, dogs, and cats. 100 smaller animals, but there's about 50 large animals.
Okay, beautiful. And so, yeah, I guess like the education is important. Like, how do you manage to make, again, this may be a random question, but how do you manage to make the meals for 50 cents a pop, basically?
Yeah, and it varies a lot depending on country. So as I said, it
Okay.
it's just an average. We have very cost efficient
Okay.
projects in India, which are co-sponsored by the
Okay.
Indian government. So as a result, we get all the grains and food supplied by the government, and we simply have to prepare the meals. The operations
Yeah.
have to be covered by us or our sponsors, right? So that preparing, distributing, security, the whole kitchen, cleaning, all that stuff which makes the meal happen. But the actual grains and spices and vegetables are supplied by the Indian government, so that reduces the cost immensely. And then in some cases, we're growing our own vegetables, so that reduces costs. Um, and in some countries, it's cheaper, but to be fair, now it is getting more expensive. But still, our Indian projects are very, very, very inexpensive because of the partnership we have with the
Yeah.
Indian government. So it can go from 50 cents to like $2. Like, for example, we just got a message from one of our projects in Ukraine, or no, Belarus, somewhere in Russia, and they were saying that it costs around $2.20 for a meal. And we wanted to look at that. Well, what are you actually providing them? Maybe there's a way we can reduce that. But that's
Yeah.
what it was costing them because of
So out
inflation.
of the, of
It's still
course,
good. It's still
yeah,
good
yeah,
because
of
it's
course,
freshly
it's
cooked.
still
Yeah.
really cheap. Like obviously, if the donation goes a long way compared to if you were to buy someone a meal here, right? It would cost you 20
Yeah.
bucks to go to a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's still so it's like 50 cents to $2.50. It varies, but we can serve
Yeah.
someone for 50 cents.
Perfect. So, question for you is obviously out of the 8.8 plus billion meals, if I recheck the website, I'm sure I'll be at 8.9 at this point. It's going up pretty fast. So, was there any moments? Obviously, I'm sure it's really rewarding to kind of see all the people that you guys get to impact. And I know you've been in the field, I'm sure, especially when it started. Was there any kind of encounters or moments that really touched your heart that just was just like, you know, a divine confirmation that you were where you were doing what you're supposed to be doing?
I've had many like that. I mean, one of the earliest experiences around that was I was in a war zone 30 years ago. So I was traveling as a monk in the former Soviet, and there was a war taking place between Georgia and the Abkhazia. Um, and we had a food relief project in the city, providing meals. We were literally the only food
Wow.
relief in the whole city. No one else was there. Same thing in Grozny, Chechnya. We were the only food relief in the whole city. Red Cross, no one else was feeding people except for Food for Life. It
Yeah.
was too dangerous. And I remember one time the cooks, and it was run by monks back then. So they would prepare the meals in the front yard. They didn't even have a tent. They just had a house in the suburbs. They would prepare the meals. And we're talking a very simple meal. I'm talking like an oatmeal slash rice slash apples
Yeah.
porridge, right? Sort of thing, concoction with a herbal tea and some bread. That was the meal. I mean, that's all you could make in that situation. All
Yeah.
the shops are closed, infrastructure destroyed. So anything was appreciated. So they would prepare this, big tubs of this porridge and put it in plastic tubs and then put it on the back of a trailer. And they had a tractor like you
Yeah.
use on a farm. And hooked up with the trailer, and they would drive this tractor to different parts of the city under gunfire. It was because fighting was going on in the city, so they took risks just driving around. And I remember I was on the back of this trailer one time, and bullets were flying over our head. Maybe not intentional, but there were bullets flying around while we were driving down the road. We arrived at an abandoned building, and there was no one there. And I said to the boys, I says, well, where is everybody? And they says, don't worry, they're there. And then this lady comes out from the basement of this building, and she has a bandana around her head, a red bandana, and she has a whistle. And she whistles. She waves to us, and she whistles. And as soon as she whistles, all of a sudden, 50 children come out of the basement, and they all surround the trailer. And one of the boys hands out sweet bread, like it's just basically deep fried bread with sugar on it. And it's like that was a candy for them. They were so happy. All the kids were like jumping up, very, very happy. So then the parents came out, and they helped us take the plastic tubs down to the basement where there was another 100 people waiting. And they were lining up, waiting for their meal of the day, their only meal of the day. So we began serving them. And as a volunteer serving, he lights some incense. He's holding incense in his left hand while he's serving. And I thought, why are you holding incense? And he says, well, a lot of these people haven't had a shower in a month, right? And it was that desperate, the situation. And you have to understand, this Georgia was sort of like the Florida of Russia. So we're talking about mostly well-to-do people who've suddenly found themselves as like impoverished, homeless people. They lost their house. They literally had nothing. They lost everything because of the war. So this grandmother comes up to me, and she's holding onto her grandchild. And she says, how is it possible that you boys are coming here and providing us a meal? This is amazing. This is a miracle. There's no other food in the whole city. You must be sent by God. This is like, they were very religious people. She looked me in the eye and she said, this is a miracle. How are you coming here feeding us like this? So that touched me very deeply, because I realized, wow, I'm being guided like this. What I'm doing is so important and has such a profound impact on people's lives. So that was the first powerful experience I had in doing charity work.
That's beautiful. It gave me chills listening to it. And it must have been one heck of an experience for you to kind of come back from that after. I can't even imagine having bullets fly over my head trying to serve people. It must have been
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's like, I've been to a few war zones. As I said, I've been to Chechnya, and I actually tell a lot of these stories in my latest book. So I share all these stories I actually have diaries from when I was a monk. So I kept record of all this.
Wow.
Like daily entries of when I was a monk, what the challenges that I had. So I don't reveal all of that in this book, but I reveal a lot of the stories.
Yeah.
And the book is called The Alpha Omega Male. So I talk about, the subtitle is A Spiritual Journey to Balance Masculinity, where I basically try to share the importance of a balanced masculinity. So masculinity is not a bad thing, as you know.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's been framed that way by many people. So the reason behind the name is alpha, meaning the leadership qualities of a man, responsibility. He's a leader. He's a strong man. He's confident. And the omega represents the spiritual side. Omega literally means greatness in the Greek language. So it's the spiritual greatness that's within us. So we have to be in touch with our spiritual side, be humble sometimes, be compassionate, be caring, be a servant leader. That's balanced masculinity, and that's sort of the presentation I make in this book. And I share my own personal journey as a monk, transcending male ego, learning to understand my responsibilities as a man in this world, but from the perspective of a spiritualist.
I think that's beautiful. I'm gonna link the links to your books down below so that the people can check them out and get a copy as well.
This one hasn't been published yet, but it has to be edited, but it's finished. I've finished writing.
Okay, I'll put your website in all the other books so people can check all the other ones as well. Whenever this one comes out, they can be notified. Okay. That's interesting because I'm not too educated about the world of being a monk. Ultimately, I didn't know that you would go to war zones to feed people. I think the only image that's shown to us on TV, and it's kind of what most people know, is that you just stay in a monastery.
Well, yeah, it's not true. We do a lot of stuff, but I was also not your average monk, because whereas most monks were simply chanting and doing their service at the temple or whatever, I was teaching myself public relations. I was teaching myself communications, graphic design, copywriting, web development. So I was actually teaching myself these skills, understanding that these skills can be used in the service of God. In fact, in 1995, I built the first website for Food for Life,
Mm.
before most Fortune 500 companies even had a website or they even knew about the internet. So we had a website in 95. So I wasn't your average monk. I was always an entrepreneurial type of guy,
Okay.
even as a monk.
Okay. That's awesome. I didn't know that. So you learn something new. You learn something new every day. But it's beautiful that you kind of guys get to go out and help ultimately, because it makes sense with kind of the mission that you're on ultimately. And so
Yeah, exactly.
a few questions. What's the future vision, for Food for Life? What are some of the projects that you guys are working on, and how can people get involved?
So the vision, it always remains the same, of just promoting this idea of like uniting the world through the sharing of pure food. Um, we may not, obviously, we're not going to achieve that goal in my lifetime. It's a long, long challenge, but it starts with, every great journey starts with the first step. So, we still have quite a ways to go, but we're making an impact. We obviously need more help with awareness. This message, I believe, is very powerful
Yeah.
and non-sectarian and very universally appreciated once people hear it, because it doesn't matter where you're coming from, whether you're an atheist or a spiritualist or a Catholic or a Hindu. What I'm telling people is universally appreciated.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then in terms of projects that we're working on, the most important one right now is the Kindly ecosystem. It's a blockchain project which I founded with Food for Life Global. And we have built a social impact tracking engine. So the idea behind that is that we're making it easy for companies and individuals to give back in a measurable way, and it's all tracked on the blockchain. So from the beginning to the end, from the dollar that is donated or purchased to the point where the actual person gets a meal, all of that is tracked and recorded on the blockchain. So that's a very powerful project. It has so much potential. We're building partnerships. We're working on integration with existing systems. We just spoke to a gaming company yesterday about integrating it into the gaming experience. So as you're like, shooting people or whatever you're doing in the gaming
Yeah.
world, you're also feeding kids. Can you imagine that? The power of that.
Yeah.
Like after playing 6 hours of, Fortnite or whatever, hey mum, I won all these points in Fortnite, but I also fed 1,000 kids.
So is it because you're mining? They're basically mining while they're playing?
No, they're purchasing it. So their rewards that they're earning in the game, a percentage of it is converted into measurable social impact.
Oh, that's awesome.
Simple as that. And we track it so in other words, while they're doing their things in the virtual
Yeah.
world, something in the real world is happening. They're actually making an impact in the real world. So it's Web3 coming into the real world,
Yeah.
not taking people away. Like the meta universe and all these things are taking people further away from reality,
Yeah.
which is really, really bad, really dangerous. What we're doing is bringing people back into the real world. So they're making an impact. They're keeping their feet on the ground, so to speak. So there's that. The Kindly Project's very important. You can learn more about it at kindlyimpact.com. And finally, just, in terms of support for Food for Life, we're desperately looking for more corporate sponsors. So we have a great presence on the internet. We have good reach on the website with lots of people visiting our website from all over the world, many languages. So there's definitely some good marketing collateral that a company can get
Yeah.
when they sponsor our charity. So we're looking for more corporate sponsors. And of course, people can donate. As I said, on average, $1 will feed a couple of kids. We take crypto as well. We're on the giving block. So you can donate your crypto now with the bull market. I'm sure people have got a lot of crypto right now. So throw some of that at Food for Life, measurable social impact, feed the kids, do something good with the money. So yeah, and volunteer opportunities are there as well. If you're traveling and you want to feed people at one of our projects, it's just a matter of contacting us and we can put you in touch with the local project. And virtual volunteering. If you have a skill that you think could be beneficial, marketing, fundraising, um, whatever social technological skill that you have, we're open to like volunteerism as well, and we give credits for that. If you're a student at college and you want to get credits, we're happy to facilitate that as well.
Beautiful. It sounds like you really built a beautiful organization. I'm a businessman as well, so as I hear all the systems and the structure you've had to put in place to kind of make all these beautiful things happen and work, and I think it's really incredible that you guys partner up with kind of some of those gaming companies and other opportunities, because you're right. I can see that in the future, Canada, United States, some of those like a little bit more richer country, as people are stepping into Web3 and are going to be stuck in the virtual world, there will be less happening in the real world. Everyone will be completely disconnected from the reality,
Yeah, yeah.
and the people are still going to be suffering, right? That are actually living in reality, that don't have the tools or the resources to use whatever goggles you need to be in the virtual world.
Yeah, so Web3 has so much power to transform the world. So we're essentially trying to make Web3 great again, you know?
Yeah, you put that on a
W
hat.
Web3. Yeah, I'm actually working on that. Like it's called it's make it's a Mawebga.
Beautiful.
Mawebga. Make Web3 great again, and also making kindness cool because it's cool to be kind,
Yeah.
right? So we want to make it easy for people to perform a measurable act of kindness, and that's exactly what the kindly ecosystem is all about.
So one thing I'd like to kind of first thing I want to do is invite the people listening to check out all the links on below to provide some support. I'm going to make a donation myself to the Food for Life as well to help out. And what is a message that you would like to pass on to the listeners and to the world? This might sound dark, but if you had to write something on your tombstone that you would want the world to remember forever, what would you write?
Well, that's what I started with. That evolution of consciousness begins when we master the tongue. It's as simple as that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that I never heard it presented that way before. So I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
It's a real simple solution to a lot of spiritual dilemmas, a lot of spiritual challenges.
Yeah, and so Paul, I want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to jump on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we did.
Even with all the internet technical things, we managed to make it work. Yeah, so massive thank you for your time and your patience, and I know the world will benefit highly from it. And I'll be sure to make my donation to the foundation. Everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to check out the links down below, and we'll see you in the next episode.